I heard you like them curves, and this keyboard's definitely got them. Let's check out Percent's latest keyboard, the PT990. This video is sponsored by ClickClack, but my opinion is always my own, don't gotta worry about it. This thing is visually stunning, but does the aesthetic warrant the price? Or does this keyboard flop? Let's get into it. This keyboard is a 65% keyboard aimed at the more premium market. The CNC here is on another level as we got curves on curves. And with those curves requires more complicated machining to make it happen. Aesthetically speaking, the badges have different materials and the weights do as well, adding to the more luxury premium feel of the keyboard itself. At the opposite end of the spectrum, we have keyboards that are full aluminum with no flourishes, and they typically feel lighter in the hand and sometimes sound a little bit hollow. And we have plastic boards as well. Those just feel super light even if they can sound pretty good. Right here we have the coffee anodization with the PVD stainless steel weight. That looks amazing. PVD used to be more popular, but these days people are leaning against it because of all the fingerprints that happen when you touch it. But you can't deny it looks super good when it's clean. The anodization here is done very well, and that color has a nice richness to it. It's as smooth as any other keyboard that I've felt. So I think the quality of anodization across the board has improved as long as the vendor has accounted for kind of mishaps in manufacturing. If they're gonna ship out B or C stock units to A stock customers, then that's on the vendor. All right, the factories can definitely manufacture something with clean anodization. The coffee color definitely looks great when the light hits it, and I think it looks super good. I originally thought anything with brown anodization was gonna look doo-doo brown and would miss. But now that I see it in hand, especially with the clean anodization, it looks pretty good. Very sophisticated and mature of a colorway. Now I gotta wipe this because I've been handling it. The PVD is centered in the back and is greatly appreciated. That way, when you pick it up, you can just touch the curves right here and you don't necessarily have to touch the PVD and fingerprint it. The badge on the front is done well with the stainless steel and the brass. Let's see if I can wipe that down a little bit. There you go. And I like how it's designed so it sits in the board rather than being a blocker or something that sticks out like the jelly boards. The drawback is it has thicker bezels overall, but at least the design language makes sense. The other additional flourish is a piece of brass underneath the PVD stainless steel weight, and it's okay. At least the branding percent is pretty minimal compared to being the entire board. The different material changes like on the badge as well as the back weight definitely makes it feel more premium because it's transitioning different colors and materials. The shape of the keyboard is slightly different with the bigger bezels, but it doesn't look like every other like rectangle 65 minimal keyboard. Overall, it's a striking design, but I think it's done well and has a nice presence on the desk. Except one thing in terms of the aesthetics is that it's locked at 6.25U for the spacebar, which is definitely a drag because I prefer 7U, or at least the option. Why does the hot swap PCB only take 6.25U? As for the build process of this keyboard, I absolutely abhorred it. I hated it. The way the JSC designed is horrible. It is soldered into this little PCB that does a 180 and flips back into the JST connector. It seems to have been done this way because it was centered between two KL hot swap sockets and it would interfere with them, but why couldn't they have just rotated it or put it somewhere else? It took me a solid 10 minutes to insert it with tweezers, and some other builders straight up skipped it and just built it dry and did a sound test without a functioning keyboard. Although I got it in, I would hate to do it again. I reported this back to ClickClack to report to the designer, and they're aware of it and will be making revisions for the production run, but the way it is now. As for the mounting, it's borrowing designs from OwlLab. They do give them credit, so it's not a straight ripoff or clone, but I personally do not like this mounting. OwlLab describes it as a beryllium copper structure with silicone dampeners. So although there's no adhesive to mess up in the installation so you can redo it over and over, the springy metal pieces make it really hard to know when the gaskets have been inserted properly. I found myself adjusting over and over, and if I like bumped it a little bit, it would fall out of place. So I had to slowly and carefully drop it in and line it up. It's not fun. This is probably a skill issue because I'm bad at building keyboards. Like, I haven't done it for that long. From that point, you just have 8 screws, 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom. So at least that part's pretty straightforward. As for the sound, let me just get started on that. When I was screwing with the screws, I could hear a lot of resonance from the case when my screwdriver like tapped the case itself. To be fair, it's a big honky piece of metal, so it's gonna resonate when you hit it with metal, right? Once I screwed it all together, it was built with KS3 Pro yellows on aluminum. The plate had no flex cuts, which is good. The PCB had no flex cuts, which is also good, but it was a 1.2mm PCB. That thin PCB is gonna give you more feel and flex, but in terms of sound, I find that it gives it more thin sound, which is not ideal for someone that cares about sound first. 1.2mm PCBs also require that you use these little shims because most stabilizers are designed for 1.6mm, so there's gonna be a gap if you don't use the shim. You gotta like thread the stabilizer through the shim into the PCB and make sure it doesn't fall, and then screw it in or snap it in properly. It's a big hassle. If you want to do what I did to save time, you can buy 1.2mm stabilizers from like Divinity and use the TXAP screw-in stabilizers because snap-in is a little bit more annoying personally. You can buy them in the 1.2mm variant and then just screw it in and you're good. No shims required. Once put it together, the first sound test was a bit lacking. The board has some heft to it, so the alpha sound pretty good because this unit here has a stainless steel PVD weight, pretty heavy, so it like vibrates less when you hit it, I guess. The sound is pretty accurate to a Gateron yellow. Unfortunately, the mod sounded weak and hollow, which is really hard to forgive for the price point. We'll get to the price point in a bit. Of course, the first build was without foam, so it needed a little bit of work. The quickest mod I like to do for this issue is to force break it. Using the Tamiya tape, I just dropped it where there's gonna be metal contact, so along here, between the little springs, and along here between the little springs. I definitely rushed it because I was getting a little bit impatient with the build, so I just let it lay where it laid. If this tape like overhangs and kind of droops into the case, it's not a big deal. It's just not going to make contact with anything, so it's no problem. The goal here is to add a gap between the top metal case, have less metal on metal contact that will resonate and make hollowness and ping. Okay, that tape is really easy to use. You can tear with your fingers. Check the link in the description below. So with the updated sound test, it sounded pretty good. With one caveat, the alphas sounded a smidge better, the mods sounded way less hollow, but the spacebar was still a little bit lacking. I think this is due to the 1.2mm PCB and the mounting. It's not really something you can mod around, it's just the design of the keyboard itself. And we'll drop in a long pole to see compared to the sound test. Here is a pen U in here, which is a very long pole switch. Let's listen. It just sounds kind of weak. It doesn't sound very full. It doesn't necessarily rattle or tick. It's just not the best sounding spacebar. But we're getting better in terms of improving the sound board to board. So I think this is okay, just not great. And in terms of the feel of the board, this is where the mounting ruined it for me. Without foam, I can totally push down the entire thing. Just you can kind of hear it there. It's kind of bottoming out like across the entire board. Because there's no flex cut in the plate, no flex cuts in the PCB, it all moves down as a unit and it doesn't really flex individually where I press, and that's kind of weird. Definitely not my taste. The sound's alright, like the plate and the PCB are driving a good sound. The mounting isn't really making it sound too gaskety or kind of like low tones. So now the biggest thing is we have the package and the price, right? It is $415 US with the aluminum weight. And that means this back piece is aluminum, which means it's not heavy, which means it's not gonna feel like girthy. And I want the heavy stuff, and that would be the PVD stainless steel, and that's gonna be $505, $505 before shipping. And with a price like that, you'd expect, you know, keyboard case, maybe a cloth to clean the PVD. The cloth I'm using is from another keyboard right here, and I definitely need a cloth. So it's kind of a drive because those things don't add a lot of cost, and if you have so much cost of the keyboard already, why not just throw it in? This looks and feels better than the budget options, but I know that the budget space is where most customers are. And in terms of the high-end space, Percent isn't one of the leaders. And I gotta mention because Percent has had some mishaps in prior GBs. I covered the Skull reboot and they were supposed to give someone a refund like years ago and they haven't. So here, if you like Percent's design and you don't have as much trust in the fulfillment, ClickClack has come out to state that they're gonna help any customers if there's any delays or lack of fulfillment. So you can trust that ClickClack will make sure that it runs smoothly, and that's kind of the benefit is sometimes designers aren't great at the logistics of running a group buy. ClickClack has proven time and time again that they can handle it. So at least ClickClack is handling, making sure that this product is going to come to life. So you got the machining, you got the anodization quality, it's great, and you have all the color options. We wish you had more variety in the PCB, but this is definitely just targeting a different market that may not care and just want something that looks good. Would I personally cop this? Honestly, it's a very aesthetically pleasing board and it looks good, feels good in the hand. It's just a very hard sell for the price point. Not everyone is looks first. Some people more into the aesthetic, and of the aesthetic forward boards, this is one of the better sounding ones I've tried. Not the best, but the alphas and the mods are pretty usable. The spacebar, you may just have to end up using foam, different switches, different plates to figure out a best sounding spacebar switch and plate combination. So it really all is going to depend on what you're looking for, a value proposition or something more finished and high end. What do you think of this keyboard? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.